It's one of those ones I watched like when I was a kid, loads. So
Yeah.
Over. It's like a really iconic one for me.
See, it's funny because I didn't watch it as a kid, but then like I was watching it and I was like,
I appreciate it more and more as an adult though, because it changes as an adult.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was gonna say. Like I was watching it initially and I was like, this might be a wee bit commercial for my liking, but then the more I watched it, the more I liked it, and then
It's insanely sad.
watching it again.
It's insanely
Yeah,
sad.
I basically watched like most of it this morning to like refresh my memory, and I was like, you know what, this is actually really,
phenomenal.
really good, very heartwarming.
Oh yeah, I sob relentlessly at this film. Are we recording? Yeah. Well, guys, welcome back to the Popcorn Head Podcast, episode 26, with your host Gavin Wilton. Joining me as always, to my left, he hangs around co-ops selling drugs to kids. It's Mr. Rory Moore. And to my right, he cleans out commodes in his spare time. It's Mr. Tom Brady. So yeah, it's Thanksgiving, guys. Yeah, Rory, sing us.
What do you do in your spare time?
Rory, sing us a wee song. It's Thanksgiving. Go on, a wee song.
I don't know any Thanksgiving
You're one of your
songs.
favorite artists. No, just one of your favorite artists. Who do you love? You love like Alexander Burke.
I know who
Bad boys always catching my.
I know who Alexander Burke is, but I struggle to name you the song.
Anyway, you lost your chance there. Thanks for coming back, guys. We really appreciate it. Or if you're a new listener, welcome to the podcast. You know what to do. Like, subscribe, rate, review, whatever. Do something, do anything, do more. Get us up there. Fight the algorithm. Fuck the algorithm. We're coming for it. And if you don't, I'm going to do a Liam Neeson and...
Which Liam Neeson quoting?
I'm going to do a Liam Neeson and go out and try and kill a black guy.
Jesus Christ.
I was looking for a black guy. That was crazy.
I know.
That was crazy. What was it? How his sister was like...
Somebody got raped and then...
sister or something?
I don't know if it was his sister or his friend, but...
I went out looking for a black guy.
Yeah. But like...
I will find you.
But I think people kind of like... People misinterpret this as him being like... You know, copping to being like a racist now.
The guy's
like,
from Ballymena.
Well, yes, obviously, but he was telling the story as in like, you know, in the context of being like, I was so stupid and like I can't believe this is something
course.
I did, and I'm like owning up to something that I did. So like,
Never owned up to that.
I went looking for a black guy. Yeah. But yeah, you must fight the algorithm. It must be fought. Like there's only so much my poor heart can take. And Rory needs to pay for his surgery. And so before we get into the film, I want to talk about if you guys had any bad travel experiences over the years, anything like notable that you would point to, or just anything, any sort of travel experiences you would
definitely, yeah. It's not really a bad travel experience, but it is quite a funny travel experience. It's kind of like in keeping with the kind of vibe of this film. Do you remember when we were in Vietnam? Mm-hmm. We got a flight from, I think it was the first flight we got from Saigon to Da Nang, yeah.
Or Ho Chi Minh City, for being politically
yes,
correct.
Ho Chi Minh City. There was a guy who was wearing a helmet to fly on the plane.
Oh yeah, he was fucking mad.
Yeah. I think he was probably, you know, requiring special assistance or whatever to get on the plane.
Right, okay.
But I got up, and as I was leaving, I like put my backpack on and turned around and like just, you know, whatever. I forget exactly what happened, but in the process of doing this, I accidentally knocked him over with my backpack. So this like guy wearing a helmet went like sprawling into a group of other people on the plane, and I was like, you know, obviously he doesn't understand me, I don't understand him, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, like looking at the other people being like, I'm so sorry. Like I could hear the Curb Your Enthusiasm music starting to play. I almost had to like run away because I didn't know how to deal with the situation.
Shit boy. Roy, I know you've got a good one that we both experienced?
Charles de Gaulle.
Charles de Gaulle.
That's a terrible, terrible, terrible airport. And we were very hungover. We were going back for the Euros in 2016 in Paris, and we were flying from Charles de Gaulle direct home, or we
It
going
was to Frankfurt and then home.
And Frankfurt
yeah,
and
very
roundabout way
made
of
no
doing
sense.
But Charles de Gaulle, it's like a bit, you know, like there's loads and loads of roundabouts in Paris.
Yeah.
It's like designed like a roundabout. It's like a big circular airport.
Yeah.
But when you get through security, there's nothing. Everything's before security.
Yeah.
Like all the shops and all the amenities are
really?
before
It's
security.
so bad.
So you get through security and then you're just sitting there.
We were at the gate that said Frankfurt or whatever it was.
And we fell asleep, and then we woke up, and our flight was being called, our last call for the flight.
Can I note there was no board to tell you about your flight?
No.
Like, you get the big boards
Yeah,
to
yeah,
tell
yeah,
you.
yeah.
There wasn't one.
And I had to completely
What the
change.
fuck?
And I got
You were
completely
relying
changed
on
gate.
an Indian woman with broken English talking through a microphone like this.
Jesus Christ.
And the flight had completely changed gate, and it was around the other side of this big circle.
The polar opposite
So we had
of
to-
the airport.
Get up and run and get around and get to it.
It was so bad.
It's a nightmare. And it's another one of these ones where it wasn't even a smoking area. Like as soon as you were through security, that was you. You were stuck there.
Yeah.
And just the worst airport and the worst travel experience of my life.
Yeah, I remember like you talking about Vietnam. Whenever me and Max flew out to Vietnam, we were going. It was Belfast City to Heathrow, then Heathrow to Vietnam. And I travel about as well as Guinness. And like I was like, my tactic was right on this. It was like 12 hour flight. I was like, I'm going to drink myself to death because drink was included in the flight. So I was just drinking.
Yeah, I've
wine.
tried that before.
I think I drank all the red wine on the plane. And halfway through the flight, they brought me down like a wee bowl of nuts as if to say, you might need these. You've had enough. I was like, get those the fuck away from me now and bring me more red wine. I need to pass out here, you know. And I just ended up drinking myself sober. So I'm just sitting there, like, I think it must have been something to do with the altitude. The alcohol just assimilated to my blood, and I just became like, I'm fine. And when I landed, I was like, I am as sober as a judge. You know? So I was awake the whole time. But then for the return flight, thankfully in Vietnam, you can buy certain things over the counter that you can't buy here. So I bought a big strip of diazepam, got the blues in, and I popped about return flight. I had like 3 blues, took them all, glass of red wine, woke up in Heathrow drooling in my mouth, just like, I've done it. I've fucking unlocked the hack. Brilliant. Anyway.
Yeah, I tried to do that on the way back from America there because I was like flying overnight, but I took melatonin that I found in the airport and it was not, I bought in the airport, not that
I was going to
not that I
up off the ground.
Yeah, I didn't lift it out of somebody else's bag or anything, but it basically meant that I had like a semi-conscious, like it felt like I was on the plane for an hour and was like constantly waking up and going back to sleep.
Yeah.
It was not very pleasant.
I don't know. Anyway, so today we are looking at Planes, Trains and Automobiles. It was released in 1987, directed by John Hughes, starring Steve Martin and John Candy.
I'll see you in Chicago, John.
You'll never make the city.
For one unique individual.
What is unique? Latin for asshole?
No, I really think we'll get to where we're going a lot faster if we were alone.
I've been wearing the same underwear since Tuesday.
I can vouch for that.
You know what would make me happy?
Have a couple balls and an extra set of fingers?
Oh, that's him. Oh, that's real humor.
So the film follows Neal Page, this uptight marketing executive, and Del Griffith, an annoying but well-meaning shower curtain ring salesman who end up being travel companions when their flight from New York to Chicago is diverted. So they end up in this like 3-day odyssey trying to reach Chicago in time for Neal to have Thanksgiving dinner with his family.
Just one thing, why the fuck is he commuting home from New York to Chicago? Like, does he live there during the week? Yeah.
Big businessman.
Does he live there during the week and then commute home for the weekend normally? Or like, what is he
It
doing?
must be a weekend thing because he says there in the film, I've been spending too much time away from home.
Yeah,
so it must
yeah,
be
yeah.
Like, he must be away for like maybe 2 weeks at a time or something,
Right.
you know. So yeah, watch. Oh, by the way, yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everyone across the pond. Watching this film has become somewhat of a tradition for people at Thanksgiving.
Oh, by the way, if Joe Biden has died by the time this comes out, R.I.P. Joe Biden.
So this is why we chose to do this film. We want to branch out to our Yankee cornheads or the pond. Thanksgiving, it's one of these things, even if you're not American, you are familiar with it. Like, you have a basic idea of what it's about, and, you know, you see it referenced in American media all the time. So, like, we'll take a wee quick look at it here. You
What's Thanksgiving about? turkey and genocide.
Yeah. So let's take a wee look at it. Rory, tell us a wee bit about Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving is a federal holiday in the US, celebrated on the fourth Thursday of November. In its origins, it was a day of Thanksgiving as part of the Harvest Festival. Colonists of New England and Virginia would celebrate it with general theme being giving thanks to God for various blessings like the harvest, ship landings, military victories, and everything being centered around a sit-down, slap-up dinner.
Oh, wow.
Which will consist of indigenous American food like turkey, potatoes, sweet potato or yams, squash, corn, green beans, cranberry, and things like pumpkin pie.
Oh, wow.
Nowadays,
Sorry. Just give me a second. Do you know what just popped into my head? You know, it's in one of the MF Doom. I think it's in the MF Doom food album where he just has all these samples of like black guys going cornbread, watermelon.
Now you got black eyed peas, carrot greens, collard greens, cornbread, watermelon.
Sorry, that just popped into my head whenever you were saying that. Please go on.
Nowadays, Thanksgiving really signals the start of the holiday season, the build up to Christmas, Black Friday being the day after Thanksgiving.
The Black Friday Bundaroo.
It's became part of the Christmas creep. How early can we get people buying Christmas stuff and giving minimum wage, 0-hour contract retail staff an absolute time of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The narrative you now get is you're giving thanks as the Pilgrims did with their Native American neighbours in Plymouth, now Massachusetts, in 1621. The feast being 3 days long, and you had 90 native Wapano.
Oh, sorry, you struggling to pronounce that, Rory?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, can you not pronounce that,
I
Rory?
was just going to say native.
I think you'll find it's Wampanoag.
Native American people.
Let's see it.
I'd be completely lost.
Wampanoag.
Native American people.
Yeah.
Will do.
53 survivors of the Mayflower.
The Mayflower is a famous one.
Yeah, that's what about.
So what's the controversy around it?
Well, we'll get there.
Sorry if I'm jumping the gun.
Celebrating Thanksgiving was on and off for a while until Abraham Lincoln proclaimed a national day of Thanksgiving in 1863. 7 years later, Ulysses S. Grant signed the Holidays Act into law, making it an annual federal holiday in Washington, D.C. Eventually, it would become a paid holiday for all federal workers in the U.S., and Congress would give it a permanent observation date from 1942. Now, as you'd imagine, it's not without its controversy. Some look at Thanksgiving Day the way they look at Columbus Day, sort of papering over the cracks of genocide.
In this house, Columbus is a saint.
Some look at Thanksgiving Day the way they look at Columbus Day, sort of papering over the cracks of genocide and conquest of Native Americans. If you look at it all on paper, it does seem to be an established story of the goodly pilgrims breaking bread with their native neighbours to look past their differences. Some feel it should be a national day of mourning or atonement rather than self-indulgent family feasting.
Yeah, if you read about what actually happened to the Native Americans and like, you know, the really dark shit that actually went on, you can understand why people would see it as distasteful, because there is some, you know, horrific stories.
It is pretty bad.
Yeah, and it was systematic. It wasn't just like a few isolated incidents.
I've been listening to a big 16-part series on George Custer, Sitting Bull, and Crazy Horse, and there's an awful lot of bad stuff happening.
What's that in?
Rest is history.
Oh, okay.
It's a
Maybe
great
I'll listen to
podcast.
that.
Very
I've
good
never
podcast.
listened to it, but
It's very good. I don't listen to it. There are some episodes of it I skip, which I'm not so interested in some of the really ancient shit out there. Like, there's a lot of really ancient stuff that just doesn't do it for me. But
my issue with that is like, how big is their research team? And like, I don't really want someone. The reason why I haven't delved into it is because it's like, who are they? Like, if you're covering so many
They are
different.
great. Like, is it
But if-
Dan Snow?
no, that's another one. It's Dominic Sandbrook
Yes.
and Tom Holland.
Tom Holland. He's very good.
But what I was thinking was like, how are you going to cover so many different topics if you're not an expert in any one of them? You know what I mean?
Oh,
like, I would.
Oh, right, yeah. Like such a
I'd be
broad
more
spectrum.
comfortable if they had like a guest expert in whatever field they were covering at the time.
Say Tom Holland would be an expert in. He's written a lot of books on on Rome and on early religion, whereas Dominic Sandbrook would be very big in contemporary American history. And they do get guests on every now and then.
Yeah. Anyway, back to the natives.
Oh yes, we're nearly done. Some natives actually hold an un-Thanksgiving Day during which they mourn their ancestors. And the American Association for the Advancement of Atheism have offered an alternative holiday called Blame Giving Day.
That sounds about right, yeah.
A sort of protest against divine negligence.
Anyway, so with the film, John Hughes, his career started off when he dropped out of the University of Arizona and he started selling jokes to some big names like this comedian called Rodney Dangerfield.
Oh yeah, I've heard of him.
Rory,
yeah.
you would know him as Mr. Burns' son in The Simpsons.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, who am I talking to?
All the one-liners.
If you don't like this, like a bunch of other crap. And then he became an advertising copywriter, which meant he would take frequent trips to New York City, visiting the offices of National Lampoon magazine. And Hughes would end up becoming a regular contributor on that. One of the first stories that he wrote would become the basis for the film National Lampoon's Vacation, which was a big hit in 1983.
Chevy Chase,
yeah. He would make his directorial debut with a film called 16 Candles in 1984, which sounds like Julie's 16th birthday, the album we're very fond of. And this was like the first of a string of teen films Hughes would make in the 80s, including The Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Planes, Trains and Automobiles, it would act as a bit of an image change for John Hughes. It was like, could he entertain adults as well as teenagers? So the film would actually be inspired by a hellish trip that John Hughes made from New York to Chicago. He basically had this 11 a.m. presentation in New York City and a 5 p.m. flight back home, but this winter storm forced like all the Chicago flights to be cancelled, continuing into the next day. And then when he finally did get a flight, it was diverted to Denver, then he was diverted to Phoenix, and like all in all, it took him 5 days to get home, basically.
Jesus Christ.
So yeah, he bashed out the first 60 pages of the film in about 6 hours, and he had a first draft done in about 3 days. Then
That's impressive.
Yeah, very impressive. So then they went into casting, and Hughes, he originally wanted Tom Hanks for the Neal Page role because he was so hot at that time, and he also wanted John Travolta for Del Griffith, right? Hanks wasn't.
That's mad casting.
Would have been a very different film.
Hanks wasn't available because he was like too in demand. And Paramount, they were not hot on Travolta because at this time he was considered box office poison. Like, his career his career went down the tubes after Grease. His career was only rejuvenated by Pulp Fiction. That was the film that saved John Travolta's career because he was like, he was poison between Grease and Pulp Fiction. Because he made nothing but shite between those two films. Basically. And Grease isn't exactly amazing either. It's just iconic, you know. Yeah. But what were you gonna say, sorry?
I was just gonna say when's Face Off, late 90s.
Oh yeah, 98 or something.
Right. That's the only other one I can think of with him.
Yeah. So enter Steve Martin, right? Steve Martin's career, he'd started off writing for the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour.
That's fucking Funkhauser from
Curb. Yeah. Don't you ever touch my yarmulke. And then he ended up becoming a frequent host on Saturday Night Live. It's like in the 70s, Steve Martin was one of the most popular stand-up comedians in America, and he became a bit of a rock star. Like he was selling out arenas, like tens of thousands of fans, and they would go crazy for him, like screaming and all when he came on stage. He was huge. And Steve basically said that like the whole stand-up thing wasn't really intentional for him. It's not what he wanted to do. It just happened. His whole plan was to get into films. So his first big film success came in Carl Reiner's comedy The Jerk in 1979, which is very, very funny. He was even approached by Stanley Kubrick, who had wanted to make the screwball comedy version of a novel called Trom Nouvelle, which Kubrick would later adapt into Eyes Wide Shut, which is very strange. It's a very strange thing. It's like that initial idea of making like a comedy of that kind of thing. Yeah, very, very strange. Even though like you could obviously... Hint, we may be doing Eyes Wide Shut soon, and we might touch on how it could be seen as a black comedy in which Tom Cruise cannot get laid for love nor money. Steve Martin, he would collaborate a lot with Carl Reiner. He did Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, The Man with Two Brains, and a film called All of Me, and he was praised for his acting in all these films. So Steve is a big star. He's a box office draw, and he would be convinced to join Planes, Trains and Automobiles based on two scenes he read in the script. The seat adjustment scene in the car and his character's tirade at the car rental desk as well.
Oh, it's so good.
So then for the Del Griffith role, they end up getting John Candy. And John Candy, he'd started his career with Toronto comedy shows. He played these various characters and sketches. There was the Street Beat TV personality, Johnny LaRue, 3D horror auteur, Dr. Tongue.
Hold on. I need to look this up.
And the sycophantic and easily amused talk show sidekick William B. Williams. He would move into films in the beginning of the 80s, appearing in like the Blues Brothers. Did you find that's phenomenal.
Really?
The glasses.
So yeah, he would do like the Blues Brothers, National Lampoon's Vacation, Spaceballs. So yeah, he was appearing in various, supporting comedy roles. He was popular, but not as big a name at this stage. So when they were filming, Steve Martin, he got the script and he was really surprised at the length. It was 145 pages. And like a comedy script is typically about 90 pages. It's like when you look at scripts, it's like 1 minute of film per page, basically.
Right.
And he sort of asked John Hughes, did you plan on cutting any of this script? And Hughes was apparently perplexed by this. He had no intention of cutting any of this, And John Hughes, he would end up shooting over 600,000 feet of film for Planes, Trains. Like the film's running time clocking in at nearly 4 hours.
Jesus Christ.
Like the additional footage, it does still exist, but apparently it would take years to transform it into a film. It's like it's locked away in the vaults of Paramount, So the film's editor, Paul Hirsch, along with Hughes, they would cut the film down to 2 hours, then to 90 minutes. So in the end, they took out more than they actually left in.
Yeah.
It was a nightmare for the editors as well, because like whenever John Hughes was shooting, he never actually cut the camera. So like, if he was doing like a close-up, he would just do a reset and there wouldn't be any slating or anything.
Oh my God.
It was just like, okay, let's just do that again.
Nightmare for the editors.
Yeah, that was a fucking melt. Yeah.
Do you know what I saw something earlier on when I was doing some research for this? There's a bit where Neil punches Del. Apparently that scene had to be shortened, and after that happens, he tells him that he like didn't buy the insurance for the car and he punches him in the face. And then for the rest of the film, he has a black eye.
That's right. Yeah.
Or for like the next scene or whatever, he has a black eye.
So before filming, John Candy, he arrived with all this exercise equipment he could use during production. He had like a treadmill, a bench press, weights, among other stuff, and it was all installed into his hotel room. And Steve Martin would later say, John Candy never used any of it. They had a lot of issues with transportation companies, because like obviously basically no transportation company wanted to appear in this film because it might make them look inept.
Might be bad for business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It seems they have a very low opinion of people. Like, oh, we can't allow our company to appear in this film, otherwise people will think we suck. But I think I've changed my mind on that, being condescending to people after Sideways, and like the huge hit to Merlot sales after Sideways.
Oh God, yeah.
Like, yeah, even people who consider themselves sophisticated aren't immune to that kind of stupidity.
Yeah. So the crew would they would have to rent like fucking 20 miles of train track and refurbish these old train cars to shoot that whole sequence on the train. They had to build a set for the airline terminal. They had to create their own rental car company with its own logo, uniforms, and they had to rent fucking 250 cars for the car park of the car rental company, which is madness. Probably very expensive.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, most of the film was shot in Batavia and South Dayton, which are both in the state of New York, and like this was pretty big for these communities. These are places that they looked like the rural Midwest, only with much more snow, so it was good for filming. So like much of the buzz in these communities, it was for Steve Martin and John Candy being in town, like both being very, very popular in the comedy scene. There's one great story of John Candy and his friend going into like some local tavern around midnight. They went for a few pints, played a bit of darts, and then John Candy is like, I'm hungry. And if John Candy's hungry, God help you. You know what I mean? Like, and in the bar, there's this manager of this like local pizza place, and he's like, yeah, I mean, I'll make you the best pizza in Batavia. And John's like, yeah, I'll go, but he's like, but only if I can make the pizza. So they end up going to this guy's pizza place. The guy opens it up around like 2:30 in the morning, and John Candy just basically takes over the kitchen to like entertain and cook for everyone. And he kept them up till apparently near 5 a.m. Story. So the snow itself, when they were filming, it was very it didn't cooperate. It did not cooperate. There was a strong lack of it. And Steve Martin said that the cast and crew basically lived the plot of the film. They were hopping on planes, trains, and automobiles to chase down snow between the Midwest and the East Coast. So they would end up bringing this like snowmaking crew in from Vermont to like help them out a wee bit, you know. Now, this is a film, I feel the film itself, it really flows. Like everything feels very natural in this film, and much of that is down to the actors who are essentially playing themselves in a lot of ways, but because of the film, it all feels very truthful. I feel when I watch it, you know, like this is a film, it's always stayed with me. I think about it very, very often. Like if you were to take all the buddy movies and road movies, like this is the one for me that really stands above the rest. And you could attribute that to that universal theme of empathy you get in the film, you know, understanding how other people feel and not holding others to your own standards.
Yeah,
you know
really, really important thing for your own mental health more than anything.
Yeah, like both these men, they couldn't be more different, and they're thrown together by fate, and they're basically set on this odyssey of indignant travel. And what makes it worse is they can't seem to shake each other off, and they keep getting dragged back together.
That kind of perfectly sets up what I was going to say, you know, because like them getting dragged back together as opposites, it's almost like a magnet.
Yeah.
You know, like they're polar opposites. Like you got Neal, who's an uptight, beleaguered cosmopolitan who's like constant frustration at everything in his life has made him like openly hostile at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
And then John Candy's Dell is like an oafish, like disgustingly uncultured swine, basically, but who has a heart of gold.
He's the everyman.
Yeah.
Like, we'll talk about the film itself. So like I think the opening sequence is so brilliant in how efficiently it sets everything up and it plants all these little seeds. So like when the film opens, the title card, you know, it tells us we're in New York City. It's 2 days before Thanksgiving. We see Steve Martin in this this boardroom. You know, he's looking at his watch. He's got a really hilarious watch as well. He's looking at his plane ticket. He's mouthing to his colleague, you know,
I have to catch a plane.
While this boss is at the other end looking at the design for the adverts, and like it feels like he's been doing this for hours. You know, he's like sitting really far back, you know, fucking
and then there's a bit where it looks like he's gonna let them go or something, and then he starts looking at it
They're
again.
all leaning in, like
their facial expressions say so much without them having to say anything.
They're hanging on to like every like movement or sound.
Yeah.
He makes, like,
And then as they're leaving, as they're going for the lift, he says something like 2 hours of like we're advertising cosmetics, not curing cancer.
But I found if you really analyze that whole opening scene, if you really look at like Neal's environment as a character, that office that he's sitting in, or like the boardroom or whatever it is, it's very modern, it's lavish, it's almost like futuristic nearly in a lot of ways. It was like below the boss's chair, there's like lighted glass sort of like coming up from the ground. It almost reminded me of like 2001 The Space Odyssey.
Yeah. It looks like the fucking inside of like a room in Star Wars or something.
Everything's so neat, clinical and clean, you know. It's all about like it's all establishing this is Neal's environment. This is where he thrives, you know. And then like you said, as they head out of the boardroom, his colleague is like, you know, why don't you get the 8 p.m. so you can fly with me. You know, it's a guy he knows, but Neal refuses. He's like, you know, and it's this.
I promised my wife I'd be home at 9.
Yeah.
And then the guy leans in as the doors are closing, and he's like, "You'll never make the 6." Whoa.
It's like it's this decision that will force him to travel with Dell as opposed to someone he actually knows.
Yeah.
He even says like, "Oh, I left my gloves," but he chooses not to go get them because he knows
he can't spend another second with his boss, which is hilarious.
It's like every decision he makes will come back to bite him in the end, you know. And his colleague, he tells him he'll never make the 6, you know, getting a cab will be chaos, and Neal just ignores him.
Yeah, like it's rush hour.
Yeah, and he ends up racing Kevin Bacon for a taxi. I noticed, like, whenever he goes out,
I'm Kevin Bacon.
Whenever he leaves the office, he seems so, like, out of place in public, Neil.
Yeah.
He's, like, bewildered nearly. He's like, oh, I have to fend for myself here. I can't use my credit card to get a fucking taxi here, you know? And, like, he ends up, he's racing Kevin Bacon down the street for an available cab. And he ends up falling over this massive luggage trunk.
Yeah.
And then he tries to, like, bribe some guy into, like, taking their cab.
Yeah, he's like, I'll like pay you $20, and he was like, what about 50? And then he's like,
Anyone who'd pay $50 for a cab certainly pay 75.
Not necessarily. All right, 75.
You're a thief. Close. I'm an attorney.
and he's like, anyone who's gonna pay 50 will pay 75. And then he's like,
can I appeal to your good nature? He's like, I don't have a good nature.
Yeah. And then he's like, calls him a crook, and he's like, close, I'm an attorney.
And while he's doing that wee deal, somebody ends up taking the cab.
Yeah.
It's the fucking chase, I got my fucking cab. Brilliant. And all this sets the story in motion. You know, this character, Neal, he's in a race against time. The clock is ticking. It's almost like, it sets it up like a thriller nearly. You know, it's like this guy has to get here by this time. It's like an episode of 24.
Yeah.
I've never watched 24. Have you ever watched 24?
One series of it, I got given like series 4 on DVD for my birthday when I was about 15.
So tell me this.
Never seen 1 to 3.
No. Tell me this. Why is it called 24?
Because there's 24 hours in a day, there's 24 episodes in a series, and each episode is an hour.
Wow.
It's a long fucking series. Jesus Christ.
That is, isn't it? Yeah.
Each episode's sort of, an hour of
So do you see him like?
Oh, right.
Do you see him like making coffee and shit, and like taking a shite?
No, nobody ever goes to the bathroom, and it's all very high. It's a bit like Homeland. It's always terrorists.
Yeah.
It's got 24 hours to
Dirty terrorist.
Save the world.
Jack Bauer.
Yeah. What's your actor? Keith Sutherland?
Kiefer Sutherland.
The son of Donald Sutherland?
Yeah.
R.I.P. Goat. So yeah, the clock is ticking obviously, and now the script is really going to pile up the conflict in the film. So he gets to the airport, he's rushing through. This is pre 9/11 as well, so you could literally just run to the gate apparently. Like,
Yeah.
Nothing stopping you.
Yeah.
Like, you remember like Home Alone and all, they get to the airport and just sprint straight to the gate. There was no like waiting in security for hours. You didn't have to get there 6 hours before your fucking flight, And
there's loads of films, and like it's a real trope from shitty TV shows at around that time where people like run to the airport, like run to catch their crush at the gate with like a bunch of flowers or whatever.
Friends, the last episode of Friends is that.
Yeah.
Ross is running to the airport to catch Rachel because she's
at the wrong airport.
She's getting on the plane to Paris. And then he gets the phone call. It's like, did she get off the plane? And then she arrives through the door. Yeah, exactly.
And you'll notice he's sitting in the airport and he spots Dell opposite him, and he's reading this book called The Canadian Mounted.
Yeah,
with like a half-naked woman. Do you know anything about that novel?
Well, I know that the Canadian Mounted are obviously their police. But that looks like an erotic novel that he's reading.
Yeah, it looks like cheap erotic fiction for men with cheap erotic minds.
He recognizes like the trunk he has with him. He sees him as like the guy who took the cab. He's got that image where it's like him in the cab, And so he meets him, he talks to him for a wee bit. He's like offering him all these, Dell's very apologetic. He's like, you stole my cab and all. He's like, can I get you some tea, some soda, a hot dog, and all this kind of stuff. And then when he goes to get on the plane, he's got like a first class ticket, but he hasn't got it. Basically, there isn't one available. He has to sit in coach, and he's fucking revolted by this. Like, he can't stand this. He ends up in dreaded coach, and he ends up, of course, placed beside Dell on the plane. And this reminded me of in January there, I went to New York, right? And on my flight out, whenever I landed in, was JFK we landed? Yeah, JFK. And I got on the wee tram thing that takes you like in and then to get the underground.
Yeah.
I met this couple. They were like around my age, and they were from just outside Dublin somewhere. I can't remember. But I was chatting away to them because I don't know. I was by myself. I was trying to try and meet some people. Chatting away, being like, oh, you're here by yourself and all that kind of thing. Yeah. And I was like, we sort of said like, oh, do you want to meet up at some point? Maybe we grab a wee drink and all. And I was like, it was all like very much I was doing all this kind of stuff, and I was like, oh, give me your number, sure, we'll do all that kind of thing.
You were Dale.
Got their number. Never heard from them again.
Yeah.
Until I was on my return flight waiting in the gate and saw them. I was just sitting there, right? Picture the scene. I'm sitting there by myself reading a Dragon Ball Z manga. By myself.
As you do.
And whenever I saw them, I sort of went like, like put my head down like that, like they might not see me. And then the fella came over and like started speaking to me. He was like, "Oh, how's it going? You enjoy your trip and all kind of thing?" I was like, "Oh yeah." He was like, "Oh, sorry, we didn't get in touch with you and all that kind of thing, you know." And I was like, "Oh, it's all good, it's all good." And then they went off to sit somewhere else, and I continued reading my manga as you do. And then I get in the plane, sit down. You know the way those transatlantic planes, it's like 3 seats. Aisle, 3 seats, aisle, 3 seats.
Yeah.
So I always, when it's those flights, I always go for the middle aisle, at the aisle, because, you know, you don't have to move ever, really, because people can always get out the other way. It's definitely the best place to sit in those kind of flights, because if someone's like in the middle, say beside you, they can always go out the other side if they have to, you know. So I go and sit in my seat. Who's beside me?
Them.
Those two, the exact couple that I fucking met on the way over. It was such like I felt like I was their Dell. I was like annoying them. I was like, I'm not meaning to do this, you know. You're sort of sitting there being like, oh, it's a crack. All right, you know? So yeah, they get proper introductions on the plane, and Dell sort of tells him, you know, I'm director of sales, the shower curtain ring division of some company. Brilliant. It's so good. And then there's another great part in the plane where it's like nighttime, you know, all the lights are off, and he's sitting there like trying to read, and it's just this like old man sleeping on his shoulder, goes like big massive top on his shoulder, like it's the most indignant travel.
It's really funny as well because he's trying to read an article and he's like, oh, you know,
a friend of mine wrote
he's like, would you mind keeping it down? I'm trying to like read this article that my friend read. And then Dell is like, oh yeah, like I can't stand a blabbermouth. Like the last thing I would want is people to say I was a blabbermouth. And then he just continues blabbering for ages about nothing.
The last thing I want to be remembered as is an annoying blabbermouth. You know, nothing grinds my gears worse than some chowderhead who doesn't know when to keep his big trap shut.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So, like, obviously then the conflict of the whole script continues as the flight is rerouted even.
Yeah.
And they end up stuck in Wichita.
Well, there's
rerouted even.
Yeah, rerouted. There's a bit where you kind of like, you start to get a bit more of a sense of both of their characters on the plane because, you know,
he takes off his shoes.
Neal's really uptight.
My dogs are barking today.
Yeah, he takes his shoes off and then he takes his socks off and he's like, Neal is like repulsed by the almost orgasmic pleasure he's getting out of this.
That's the interesting thing about the film. Like, at this point of the film, you're on Neal's side. You're very much you're like, oh, this poor man is having to suffer this really indignant travel. Everything changes as we go on. But like, so obviously they end up stuck in Wichita. Well, what state's which? Kansas, yeah. And Neal gets there and he rings his family, he rings his wife even, and he's not able to get a hotel room. Everywhere's booked out, but Dell has a solution. Like, Dell as a character, he very much appreciates Neal's problems. You know, his whole guilt sort of stems from finding out that he, quote unquote, stole Neal's cab in Manhattan. And because of this, he offers him help at every opportunity. And he genuinely wants to help him, but Neal just wants to be like left alone. He sees himself as being, you know, this self-reliant guy. You know, you get the idea. He doesn't have that many friends. It's like he just has his family and his co-workers, you know.
Yeah, and he also, I think, crucially sees himself as superior to this oaf.
Yeah. He keeps trying to escape Dell at every given opportunity and like treats him like shit a lot of the time, but Dell still tries to help him. So it turns out Dell, he's already booked a hotel, like phoning in a favor basically to a guy that he sold shower curtain rings to.
This is a constant thing throughout the movie. It's always like, I know this guy, he owes me one, I sold him shower curtains, and you're like, what? I don't see the logical connection there.
Everyone loves Dell, you know what I mean? Apart from this New York yuppie, basically.
Yeah.
And then I found that following that, they take the taxi ride to the hotel.
Oh my god.
And for me, this journey, it's like this. For me, the film gets it's great at this point because like the taxi ride to the hotel, it feels like fucking Neal being ferried, you know, into hell. You know, it's like
across the river Styx.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It's very demonic. Like the taxi's very demonic. It's all very red, wicked, and sadistic.
I think it says like Taxiola on the side, and then it's got the license plate Wolf, and then the guy driving the cab has like crazy, pointy sideburns that kind of make him look like a werewolf.
Yeah. It's all about the beginning of this travel nightmare. Like at this point, you could honestly compare this film with the Divine Comedy and Dante's
That's literally what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say.
Dante being Neal, Del being Virgil, with the flyover states being Neal's hell. Like it's
the
literally
seven hells.
Neal's hell. Like this guy, and Virgil in Dante's Inferno, he serves as the guide through hell and purgatory. And Del, though initially seen as this nuisance, he inadvertently becomes Neal's guide through this chaotic journey. Teaching him lessons about patience, empathy, and like human connection.
Yeah, and it also shows that he goes with the flow and he like takes everything as it comes, whereas Neal's constantly trying to fight the situation he's in.
Yeah.
But also it shows that there's a bit of like naivety on Del's side, because the guy has like obviously taken them on like the longest possible route to run the meter up as long as possible. And then he's like, oh, I thought your friend might have wanted to see the country because he'd never been here. Like all you see on the interstate is interstate.
Del only sees the good in people.
So he's like, he's proud of his town.
He's proud of his town.
It's like, that's a rare thing nowadays. So funny.
Do you know who the taxi driver is?
No.
Do you remember in the early series of Friends, the guy that lives below Monica and Rachel's apartment?
Oh my god!
Fuck, what's his name? He's always bashing the broom.
Yeah, that's him.
Yes, he dies
my
quite early in
God.
the show as well. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's
nice.
crazy.
But yeah, it's very much like, this is Del's territory they're marching into. He's a man of the people. Without Del to guide Neal through his hell, he would basically just be lost. He wouldn't know what to do, And then they get to the hotel, and obviously, Del knows the guy. And without them knowing, their credit cards are switched, and later in the film we'll see how this like further mugs Neal off with the rental car situation. So
he actually accidentally lifts your other man's card.
So like there's the conflict in the script just piles and piles. There's only one room, with one bed they have to share. It's like, do you want to take a shower? He's like, no.
So I noticed in that scene when I was watching it the second time around, this like CD music starts to play when he realizes the only bed is like a coin operated vibrating double bed. And then this like CD music starts to play, and then it stops whenever they have this inane like manly conversation about the cab ride. You don't get cabs like that anymore these days. And then the music starts up again when he asks him about the shower. He's like, no.
And you see
thinks he's like propositioning him for a second.
Like you see Neal, he gets out of the shower to discover like Del has used all the towels bar one tiny little like hand towel that he has to use. It's like and then as he uses the sink, he discovers like Del's massive underpants have been soaking in the sink and all that.
And he's left the room an absolute mess. Like it's horrific.
But that whole scene in the motel as it develops, this is where we really get on side with Del. We don't really see him as a nuisance like Neal has the whole time. We start to see Neal as being more like self-entitled and narcissistic. Del is, he's done nothing but really try and help him, and it's still not good enough for Neal. He still expects everything to abide by his high standards. Well, there is like, to defend Neal a little bit. He does leave. This comes back later on whenever the car gets destroyed, and he's like, you've done it to yourself finally, because he's been like making his day worse, like progressively through, while still trying to help him.
While
like, good intentions.
Exactly. Like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But he's constantly like fucking things up that make things worse for Neal. So like it really comes to a breaking point when he leaves a 6-pack of beer on the vibrating bed, which then explodes. So then Neal's having to sleep in like a wet
pool of beer.
A pool of wet stale beer, which I don't know. I don't think I could sleep in that condition.
No, I couldn't either.
And then he like blows up at him whenever
he explodes on him. It's great. It's like, honey, I'd like you to meet Del Griffith. He's got some amusing anecdotes for you. Oh, and here's a gun so you can blow your brains out.
Someone who'll listen to your boring stories. I mean, didn't you notice on the plane when you started talking, eventually I started reading the vomit bag? Didn't that give you some sort of clue? Like, hey, maybe this guy's not enjoying it?
You know, it's like,
to be fair, there's nothing more tedious than someone who's like yammering away aimlessly. You know, I think it's like profoundly antisocial for someone to do that. Like, I would go as far as to saying it's almost like social terrorism.
I love that. I love that whole monologue he gives. It's brilliant. It's like, I could tolerate any insurance seminar for days. I could sit there and listen and go, oh,
with a big smile on my face.
And it's like, how can you stand that? It's like, because I've been with Del Griffith. But yeah.
But then there's the really famous monologue from Del in response to that.
Yeah, it's
which I
heartbreaking.
knew, but I'd never seen the
It's
film,
been
but I knew
referenced
that
so many times.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
You want to hurt me? Go right ahead if it makes you feel any better. I'm an easy target. Yeah, you're right. I talk too much. I also listen too much. I could be a cold-hearted cynic like you. But I don't like to hurt people's feelings. Well, you think what you want about me. I'm not changing. I like me. My wife likes me. My customers like me. Because I'm the real article. What you see is what you get.
He's clearly really like hurt and sad, and he's clearly felt this many times before. Like, Neal isn't a complete asshole. Like, he does realize what he's done, and he shows a bit of remorse after Candy sort of tells him how it is, you know.
Yeah.
I like me, you know, what you see is what you get.
Yeah,
that was very touching.
He's like, you know, like, you can pick on me if you want. I know I'm an easy target and everything.
Yeah.
And he's really like tugging on his heartstrings. And then I like me, my wife likes me, my customers like me, etc. Because I'm the genuine article. What you see is what you get, which is kind of the opposite of Neal, because he's like this yuppie who's trying to like put up this front and like, oh, I'm so sophisticated, like I'm too good to you know, go on the bus, like I have to fly everywhere, etc.
But it's great. And then it cuts to the next morning where they end up like they're wake up, they're cuddled together, and Del like kisses his ear and like, why'd you kiss my ear?
Why are you holding my hand?
Where's your other hand? Between two pillows. Those aren't pillows. It's fucking
and then they have to they're like fretting around the room, like waving their arms, and they can only like reestablish their composure and manliness by like
Bears game.
They start like literally flexing their muscles, and then they're like,
See that Bears game last week?
Yeah, hell of a game. Bears got a great team this year. They're gonna go all the way.
talking about the Bears game.
It's very much like that generation, like of those characters that you know, being raised to sort of not show their feelings toward other men.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, that kind of, it plays into that kind of thing.
They're
raised to be very, you know, conservative and all
Yeah,
that,
and
you know.
also like in the 80s there was a real like anti-gay moral panic. You know, it's like very similar to the anti-trans stuff, like literally the same lines. Like I remember hearing some like anti-gay propaganda from the 80s and being like, holy shit, that's like so similar to what people say about trans people now.
Yeah.
It's the same idea, but that also feeds into it.
Yeah.
You know, like there's like the AIDS epidemic and everything, like the gay plague, like a punishment from God for sodomy, basically.
Yeah, but like at the end of the day, they are both two very lonely men. Only Del knows it, but Neal doesn't really know it. You know?
Yeah.
And like Neal, he wouldn't have gotten anywhere without Del. Like, he's just fish out of water. The Chicago, Manhattan advertising man with the big house, the perfect family. You know, he's used to this easy, affluent life. He's tightly clenched, you know, being able to throw a credit card at anything. Like, he needs Del, because Del is a man of the people. He has that common touch. And like, as I said earlier, you know, in the first act, we kind of empathize with Neal and his problems. You know, we just want to see this guy get home to his family. And Del is like this annoying guy getting in his way. But then as things progress, you know, we start to peel away the layers of both characters, and the roles become somewhat reversed about a third into the film, basically.
Yeah.
And Neal starts to show his true colours, and we empathize with the lovable Del instead. So now it's up to Neal to kind of win us back, the audience, you know, the viewer. Can he change his way? So that's the way the script sort of flips there.
Yeah.
And what follows are just these endless problems and speed bumps in their journey, like constant diversions. Their cash is stolen. They have to take this horrible ride in the back of a pickup truck to a train, which is the guy, Gus's son, Owen. That's Dylan Baker, who plays the paedophile dad in Happiness.
Yeah.
That's his film debut.
He's really good in it.
Great,
like, really funny.
Train don't run out of Wichita.
Yeah.
That's when you a hog or a cow. People trains run out of Stubbsville.
And he's always doing this disgusting thing with it, like clearing his sinuses or something.
He's got
It's
a
so
massive,
gross.
you see, like he's got a big swell in there, but it's a big blob of chewing tobacco.
Yeah.
On his lips, so
John
always-
Hughes, he loved staging improvisational moments for his actors to get like a genuine reaction, and he wasn't really satisfied with that scene after several takes, so he went to Dylan Baker and said privately, I want you to spit in your hand, and then right before you shake Steve Martin's hand. So Steve Martin didn't know that was going to happen. So when you see that in the film, that's his actual reaction. Like, he had no idea that he was going to be shaking his slobbery hand.
Funny.
Yeah. And what he says, like, they're like, oh, we'll get the trunk. And it's like, he gets his, is like, my wife will do it. It's like, get your skinny buddy.
Yeah.
She's skinny, but she's strong.
Yeah.
First baby, come out sideways. She didn't scream or nothing. Fucking brilliant.
It's so weird.
So good. Like, so they end up on the train. The train breaks down. They're stranded on a field.
Also, sorry, just to go back a little bit, when they're in the back of the pickup truck and it's like 1 degree outside and Neal's freezing because he didn't bring his gloves with him because he left them in his boss's office, and there's a pair sitting in front of him. He goes to pick them up and a dog just like bursts out of the hay and starts barking at him.
And when they get there, they're all like,
yeah.
It's so good.
So funny.
So yeah, they end up on the train. Yeah, the train breaks down and they're stranded in this field, and they reach another city, and Dell, he's going about selling his shower curtain rings as earrings.
Oh, it's so
He's trying to
funny.
buy-
It's like a cheap hustler.
These are Daryl Strawberry autographed earrings.
Yeah, they're all autographed. There's another one where he's like,
They're made of helium, so they're very light.
yeah, and then there's one where he's like, these were originally designed for the Grand Wizard of China, like handcrafted for the. And I was like, as in like the KKK, like the Grand Wizard of the KKK.
But yeah, they end up only getting bus tickets to take them as far as St. Louis, which is where they end up parting ways. And then Neal, he ends up going to like rent a car, but he finds out the space where his car is supposed to be is empty, and he ends up having to like walk back through like an airport runway. To go back and then explode on the rental car company.
So funny.
And it's such a brilliant scene. Like, I remember the first time I watched this film, I would have been very young, like maybe like 8 to 10 years old, and that was like the funniest thing I'd seen in my life.
Never seen anyone swear like that.
Exactly. It was I was nearly dying laughing. It's like, it's one of these things, we've all wanted to do this at some point or another.
Yeah.
You know, not that people should be treated that way, but everyone's encountered one bastard while you're at the end of your tether. Would you fuck up?
Yeah, because she's really funny. The character, the woman behind the desk, is really funny because she's having this long conversation on the phone and making him wait.
It was all improvised. That
It's
conversation
so
on the phone.
funny.
You know I can't cook.
Yeah. It's just like, see you later, gobble gobble.
Gobble gobble. Oh, bye-bye.
Yeah, it was an annoying phone call. It's a brilliant wee scene. And then they end up getting thrown together again when Neal leaves. He's like, I want to get a taxi to Chicago. And he ends up getting a fight with the taxi guy, the fucking...
Yeah. He's just like hostile to everyone by this point.
Oh, he's
just like
lost it.
reflexively,
Yeah.
like he's completely lost it. And he's like, what does he say? Like what does the guy say? Does he like laugh or something when he asked him to take him to Chicago? And he's like, I'm not joking. If I wanted a joke, I'd follow you into the men's.
Wants to take a piss. Picks him up by the bollocks.
Yeah.
Never seen a man picked up by his nuts before. He's like, do you have an idea how bad I could be?
Yeah.
His voice like it's on helium or something. It's brilliant. And then when they're on the road, Dell ends up nearly killing them both after driving on the wrong side of the road on the freeway and all that. And then he ends up fucking throwing a cigarette which lands in the back seat. And like we sort of mentioned that whole bit earlier, whenever the car goes on fire, Neal's initially like gloating over Dell being in this predicament, thinking that, you know, he's liable for this damage to the car, and he's thrilled to finally see Dell experience the back end of his actions.
Yeah, well, I think he has just like lost it. So he's laughing at it because it's like, yes, it's funny, but it's also like, it's funny because it's finally happening to him.
Yeah,
like his like oafishness is finally blown back to like to hit him.
But then he finds out that he used Neal's credit card to rent the fucking car. He loses his mind again. Yeah, it's brilliant. And then they end up at this motel, and Neal like gives the guy his designer watch to the motel clerk to make up for like the price of the room.
Yeah.
And Dell's like, I have $7 and a Casio. Dell, he's no money. He attempts to sleep in the car, and it's like lost its roof and all in the fire. It's like there's a great part where like they had that near accident with the lorries where like the wheel's been bent like 90 degrees. The wheel of the car's been bent forward 90 degrees. For, like,
and after
fingers are
yeah. His fingers are like dug into the dashboard. He has to like pull them out.
So Dell, he's trying to sleep in the car, and Neal eventually feels sympathy for Dell, and he invites him in from the cold, and Neal sort of starts to relax a wee bit, as the two they start consuming Dell's collection of airline liquors he's got on.
Oh, I thought they were from the minibar.
I assume they're his because it's like things he's collected.
Go to Jamaica, have some rum, man. Dig it. Irie, man.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
And they sort of laugh about the events of the past 2 days, and then they resume that drive back to Chicago, but like the badly damaged car is impounded by the police. And what the hell are you driving?
Do you think this is roadworthy?
Yeah. Then they finally make it back to Chicago 2 days late, just in the back of it's like a refrigerator truck, or something. And then when they finally go their separate ways, Neal, he sort of starts to realize that all Dell's like cryptic comments he's made about his wife are quite strange. I haven't been home in years. All that kind of stuff. And he goes back. He ends up going back to the train
he
station.
Realizes that there is no wife.
There's something wrong here. He goes back. He finds Dell sitting alone, sort of hopeless. And Dell reveals, that his wife's been dead for 8 years and he doesn't have a home. And Neal ends up inviting him, his new friend, to Thanksgiving dinner with him and his family. Yeah, the film for me, it feels a little like A Christmas Carol for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it's like Neal's character arc kind of resembles somewhat that of a Scrooge. Neal being Scrooge, sort of solitary as an oyster, as the book says, and Dell is kind of like, I don't know, Dell could either be the Bob Cratchit or I feel like the Ghost of Christmas Present, the very jovial, joyous, live in the moment. What's that line he always says, in the present? Come on in or call me.
Come in and know me better, man.
Come in and know me better, man. Yeah. Film critic, we bring him up all the time because he's great. Roger Ebert, he told a great story about meeting John Candy at a hotel bar in New York, in Manhattan. John Candy, he was by himself, he was smoking and he was drinking, and they were going to be on the same TV show or some talk show or something, and they ended up talking for a while, and Roger said that John Candy was very depressed. He sort of said like people really did love John Candy, but he didn't seem to know that. Like he was a very sweet man. Nobody had a bad word to say about him, but he was really down on himself. He hated himself because he tried too hard to make people laugh. And Roger sort of thought of Dell. This was after Planes, Trains, and Automobiles came out. Yeah. He thought of Dell, and like he considered like there was so much truth in the role that John Candy played in that film.
Yeah.
And like how it really transformed the film for him in a lot of ways. Like, I think this film I think it's incredibly important. I think it belongs among films like It's a Wonderful Life, and like we sort of said, texts like A Christmas Carol, in that it's a film very much about moral reawakenings, like empathy, learning how to communicate with people, and like realizing the impact you have on people without really noticing. You know what I mean? And it's so relevant now when human compassion and empathy dwindles day by day by day. Like socially distanced communication, like people only being able to really communicate on their phones, while being emotionally stunted in person. Stuff like that.
Yeah, don't even ring me on the phone, text me.
Yeah,
like I can't handle a phone call even.
Yeah, like Neal Page, he starts off as a very impatient and self-centered businessman. Well, you could compare that with Ebenezer Scrooge, the miserly, isolated figure. And then by the end of their journeys, both characters, they experience a significant personal growth and redemption in their characters.
Yeah.
And Del Griffith, he sort of serves as like an inadvertent guide for Neal, helping him learn important life lessons through their travel mishaps. Similarly, Scrooge is guided by the ghost of Christmas past, present, and yet to come, which shows him the impact of his actions on others. So you could look at the film being like Dell is nearly like a ghost in a lot of ways. Like, a guy who hypothetically died when his wife died, and now he's like serving as this sort of like servant to other people, like guide them and help them, that kind of thing. Like,
I think that's a really interesting
like
analysis.
Also, like here's a film without the escape of fucking like smartphones.
I was literally gonna say like that scenario would be a fucking nightmare before the internet. You know, like, yeah.
People from every background and economic class had to deal with each other. You had no other choice, really. And the film should, in a lot of ways, act to encourage people to be more like Del in a world filled with Neals.
Yeah.
More and more Neals, you know. Like, Del's character, as I said, he is like a spiritual guide. He's like a ghost. And his wife's death affected him so badly that he's chosen to live permanently on the road, no home, nowhere to spend Thanksgiving. Like, and he sees a man trying to get home to his family, and he does whatever it takes to help him get home.
Yeah. Like, my friend needs to get home for Thanksgiving dinner.
Like John Candy, he brings so much truth and soul in his performance. Like, it's so sincere. This guy who means well by what he does, but it just seems to cause trouble for both of them. You know, like, and like Steve Martin, he couldn't be better here either. He walks that really fine line, you know, verging on just being this ungrateful, stuck-up asshole. But you know, his frustration is built on his love for his family, and his character arc is a great payoff.
Yeah, there's like redeeming factors, and like he is moved by Del being hurt by him, like having a go at him, basically.
In a recent documentary on the life of Steve Martin, there's this great segment in which the actor actually remembers his friend John Candy, and it's very, very touching. Watch it here.
John Candy was very sensitive and very complex, and we really loved each other.
I had a beautiful scene.
Look, I'm not going to read this speech, but it's that long. We're at a train station, and he gives the entire explanation of his life. And I was opposite him. I was like weeping as he was performing it. And it was all cut. So I don't know why it was cut, except for tempo, and maybe you're at the end and you don't want to hear a long speech. It was cut down to a line or two.
I don't have a home. Marie's been dead for 8 years.
There was a line I loved. It says, I sort of attach myself to people from time to time, like with you, especially around the holidays. I can take it in March, July, October, but it gets hard. And then he said, this time I couldn't let go.
Fucking hell, that's heartbreaking.
Oh, so sad. That broke my heart when I watched it. I cried like a little girl. But yeah, no, John Candy and Steve Martin, they would both say, obviously before John Candy's death, this was the favourite film they ever did in both their careers. Anything else you want to touch on?
I was just going to say, like, I think the key, like, moral lesson of the film is that they left in and didn't cut, by the look of it, is the bit where they're talking. I think it's when they're driving, and Neal's like, how can I just go with the flow, you know, like, and they're having this discussion about how, you know, John Candy is so happy-go-lucky because he just goes with the flow and takes things as they come and doesn't worry too much about everything. And that's kind of reflected in, you could call it like karma. Even, you know, like, he doesn't take things too seriously. He doesn't get too wound up about it. He just, like, takes things as they come. And as a result, everything is easy for him.
Yeah.
He never seems to have any trouble. You know, like, he finds it really easy to get a hotel room. He finds it effortless to rent a car. Like, nothing ever phases him and nothing ever gets to him because he's like, what does he say? There's a phrase he uses where he's like a twig on like a grand current or something.
Yeah, of like a mighty stream or something.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I think that's kind of like the key gist of the film, you know, like it's one guy learning to like loosen up and kind of get that, you know, that you can't like control every aspect of everything around you all the time. You have to be a bit more flexible.
Yeah.
And like the benefit that you can be brought to your life by doing that.
Yeah. No, it is. It's a very touching film, I think. It really does. It gets me. And I'm an emotional guy. It doesn't take much to make me
an
cry,
emotional wreck, you could say.
When I watched it last week, I was done after. I was just like,
why is Neal's wife so emotional? She's like over the top emotional.
I'll tell you why. So, like we said earlier, the film was like 3-4 hours long. Mm-hmm. So there was a whole subplot in the original film they did where she thought he was like having an affair.
That makes sense because there's a couple of times where she's like, "Where are you? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
what's going on, Neal?"
Yeah. That's exactly.
There was a whole subplot where she thought he was having an affair.
Because when he comes home, she is so overly emotional for
something
that's just been away.
It's like she thought he was dead. Yeah. Like, I know what you mean. Yeah, it comes across kind of weird where she's like upstairs like,
Also,
every time you go away. Yeah, I love it.
Did you notice there's
Beautiful.
there's a funny bit where he's, you know, the bit where Dell is like flogging the curtain rings as earrings? There's a bit where Neal is phoning his wife and he's holding the phone like it's got a boa on the handle or something.
Yeah, he's so repulsed by the the working class.
Yeah. Joe Public has been getting their sticky hands all over this.
You notice as well, like before him and Dell part ways at the final train stop in Chicago, Neal's dressed like Dell. He's wearing like all these like makeshift clothing. You know, it's like he's became more like him. You know, It's a wonderful film.
He's less worried about his appearance.
Yeah. No, it's
also
important lessons to be learned.
Yeah, there's just one other thing I was gonna say about whenever they're on the bus, and it's all about like knowing your audience.
3 coins and a front.
Yeah, he starts trying to sing like some Frank Sinatra or something.
Happy
And everyone turns around and looks at him like, what the fuck?
Wait, the Flintstones. Right, what this?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm talking like Harvey Bogart. That was great, guys. Thanks for joining us again. Have a very nice Thanksgiving if you're over the pond, and good luck on Black Friday. I know it's hell out there. The Black Friday Bundaroo. Anyway, take it easy. See you next time.
Nice, guys.
Happy holidays.
Happy holiday and a happy new year.